Hello, my friends, and welcome to MSP Unplugged's Tech Talk Tuesday, Designing Your Services. My name is Rick Smith, and I am your host today. This is the place to learn tips, tricks, and strategies that help you run and grow your IT service business. Whether you're a one-person shop or a more established business leading a team for the journey, this is the place for you. Let me introduce you to my co-host, Chicago's own, Mr. Paco LeBron. How are you today, sir?
I got you. I thought you thought I was on mute, didn't I? For those that were listening on the audio, I acted like I was on mute. But I'm doing fantastic, Mr. Smith. How you doing this fine, gorgeous, faux Tuesday recording on a Saturday morning going?
Well, stumbled over my words a little bit, but doing good today. Can't complain. How are you, man?
Living the dream, my friend.
To all, even though this is a recorded show, I want to give a shout out. Today we are recording. It is Saturday, February 18th. It is the post day of Mr. Paco LeBron's birthday, 2/17. So I want to wish him on air and happy birthday and wish him many more, my friend.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Seems to be a monumental February thus far. Had a real great time yesterday, which was Friday, February 17th. At obviously the time that we're recording this. And so I was at the MSP Rescue event thrown by Harry Brausfield. And yeah, just really great time. It was hosted over at the Chicago Yacht Club by Lori Tishney and Captain Bill. And it was a good time. Networked with a lot of our friends, Joe Konazovich and Mike, Jerry Bradsfield, Tom Wilmot, same crew. Met a lot of great new people. So it was definitely a lot of great time, good education, and just all around good times. So it was definitely a great event. Hats off to him. I believe he is going to be doing some more throughout the year, and wish him much luck from there. But yeah, that was my birthday. Spoke at a conference, rented out a theater, watched a movie, called it a day. So
it was a good time by all. Big time, renting out the movie theater for his
birthday party. I have to say, cool? my fiance rented out the theater as a gift to me, so I didn't do it. So that's had all my friends and family there. So for sure.
Well, shout out to you. I hope everything went great, and glad to, hopefully next year we'll be sitting here and we'll get the whole crew on and sing happy birthday to you during the
show. Yeah, good times indeed.
Okay, well, let me not drift us off too far off topic, but before we do get to today's topic, I do want to give a quick announcement to what is now my favorite thing, and Paco, I know it's yours as well, right?
It sure is.
That is TechCon Unplugged. TechCon Unplugged is happening September 10th to the 10th, September 7th to the 10th at the Delta Hotel in Woodbridge, New Jersey. TechCon Unplugged is our annual gathering where IT business owners, techs, and vendors in the space. From there, you're going to learn from like-minded business owners and panels and breakout discussions. You can gain key takeaways from partners and vendors in the community. And my absolute favorite part is you get to experience those one-on-one spontaneous conversations where great friendships are built, relationships are cultivated, and ideas are exchanged. Tickets for TechCon are on sale now at techconunplugged.com. We encourage you to take advantage of our early bird pricing, which is $199, and that is good until March 31st. We do look forward to seeing you there. Paco, I know you planning on showing up, huh?
I mean, I guess it's more something on the to-do list, right? It's about a month before my wedding, so I got to go ahead and definitely show some face before I go into my seclusion as the year goes ahead and rolls out. But I am super excited that we have finalized where our Saturday night social will be, and that'll be coming up here on the update on our websites moving forward. But Rick, I know it's been a little bit of time. We were trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
But I think we're pretty happy with where we're going to be. Should we let the fine people know where we're going?
Yeah, I think we can let them in on it.
All right, I know it's been a little bit of time here, everyone, but as we've mentioned, we're going to be kicking off this event Thursday with a evening mixer that will happen at the hotel. We got some ideas going around for Friday. There may be some unofficial get-togethers going on. But Saturday, as we normally have our kind of our big shindig, as we kind of call to the end, as we round out the event, as we go on September 9th. Obviously, the event ends on September 10th. We will be at the Woodbridge Brewing Company. So we decided to make sure that we replicate what we had in the previous years. There's going to be a lot of great opportunities to network, great food, great ability to just talk about anything above on tech. Have a couple brews if you like, if that's your style. And most importantly, I haven't said this for quite some time, and Rick knows what I'm about to say, is where the magic happens. So, so again, head over to TechConUnplugged.com and get your ticket today.
Yeah, Ron, we look forward to seeing you there. Okay, now we got all of that out. Let's talk about today's topic here. And we're talking about designing your services and how they translate into the tools you use. You know, one of the biggest things you always hear MSPs talk about, you know, when we get in these intimate conversations or where the magic happens, we always talk about, hey, what are you using for this or what are you using for that? And it's not necessarily, you know, to critique, it's to, you know, we get those answers, say, hey, well, why are you using this or why are you using that? And a lot of times we don't realize it's built around our services. However, we design our tech stack is built on basically what we want to offer to our clients. So we thought it would be an interesting conversation to have is, you know, how do we go about designing, first and foremost, what our services are we're going to offer to our clients? Then how do we select tools that fit into that? And then, you know, as a final portion is how many tools is enough tools to do what we need to do? So, Paco, I'll let you start this conversation off with how you did, first and foremost, how you design your services.
Sure. I think that, you know, and again, it's always the whole big, you know, what tool are you using? What do you got in your stack? You know, how do you like it? Or even when we're at shows, right? We hear a vendor come up and is like, hey, are you using them? I think you're using them. How do you like them? Are they okay? What's the crowd, you know? And there's always that back and forth and trying to figure out, and there's the tool sprawl or the shiny new object, right? You know, what I will say is, you know, kind of going into this, obviously we are just mentioning on how we're doing. It is not to say that this is the end all be all. You can have many different ways to structure your services, how to design your services, right? A lot of popular models are, you know, some will have a hardware as a service, security solutions as a service, and then IT support as a service as like a 3-prong pillar to try and get them all into one shot. Some will do all inclusive, which is like what we do here. We do a per user basis. There are others that will do a per machine basis. And then there's some that do hybrid, et cetera, et cetera. So for us, you know, we had to go into this, and we actually just restructured this back in August, I believe. August or September. I can't really recall, when me and John Dubinsky, who is my current director of IT operations, we always try to do this every August around that time frame, trying to figure out what are we missing, what are we trying to attack, you know, because the landscape is always changing, right? But we set this time specifically so that we can make sure we keep our, you know, hands on the pulse. But also, you know, as the threat landscape is changing, we want to keep up with the change as well, versus, like, as you mentioned, Rick, you know, the nice shiny little thing that comes out and everyone's trying to jump. Well, I need this, or I need to go and do that. But we haven't even finished getting our stuff going to get a basic foundation, right? And so for us, what we decided is, you know, we were very big on utilizing the NIST cybersecurity framework. But we felt that we wanted to go in more of a granular / checkbox of making sure that we are, you know, a framework that we can say, all right, we're doing this and this is how we're doing it for there. And it's not really open for interpretation other than the type of solution to check that box. So what we're using is CIS version 8 as kind of like our framework, which is obviously the center, or not obviously, I should say, the CIS stands for the Center of Internet Security. And what I'm specifically talking about is the CIS Critical Security Controls version 8, which is about 18 quote unquote steps that help you determine on, mobility, work from home, outsourcing, like everything in between, of figuring out what you can do internally for your business along with the services you provide your business. And then from there, that entire framework has determined 25 things that make up our services. And then from there, we kind of go into more detail of how those all kind of structure. But that's how we're structuring our services, is on a all-inclusive, all you can, now I want to say all you can eat, but all-inclusive per user pricing, with 25 items, which range from tools, services, hardware, etc., that complete this quote unquote solution.
Okay, so it's interesting. Excuse me. As we develop these, I am using NIST, and I've stayed with NIST, and I am doing it basically. I think I brought this up before. There was a chart that I got at what is it called? It was a conference I went to in July in New Jersey, and the Build It conference. I'm sorry,
IT by Design.
Right, IT by Design, and there was a security presentation being done. This is actually where I met Tiffany Ricks, who is from Hackware, and there was a chart they presented with the NIST framework, and there was basically broken down into each one of the sections of NIST, and basically going across what product do you have that fits in each one of these charts that helps you either prevent or help you fit one of these boxes, right? And you fill that chart out to see where this is basically how I developed my stack. Now they have it basically left of boom. This is pre anything happening. How do you deal with it? And then right of boom, after basically the stuff hits the fan, and how do you deal with it from there, right? So that is how I designed my current stack, and that is how I look at it. So I'm basically, my services determine both sides of this, right? Now, this does include some things that are not necessarily in a stack, but it fits into particularly the stuff on the right of boom. Basically, do you have a response plan? How does that work? Does the customer have a response plan? So, but we can go deeper into that as we go along. But that is how determining those services that way is how I chose the tools that I use to satisfy each one of those categories. If that makes sense to you.
It does.
Okay, so the next step and we don't necessarily have to name tools. Everyone knows, I have learned that most of the tools do basically the same thing, right? Let's talk. RMMs do RMM stuff, PSAs do PSA stuff, security tools do security stuff. They all fall into different categories. It's really more so according to what you like, and what you're comfortable with, right? What you can use that's effective for you and for your business. So we're not here to necessarily promote one tool over the other, but what we are talking about is making sure that we are using the tools for the right job, right? Or the right tool for the right job, I guess is the way to look at it. And that comes in when you're talking about, hey, now I know what I'm trying to fill, right? Now I know the areas I'm trying to fill in my services. Now let me go find the tool that works for me. So, what do you do next, Paco? So you've designed it. Now do you experiment with tools? Do you test? Do you just go on what you know? How does that work?
Oh, I just deploy it blindly. I just go ahead and flip all the switches, let it go, and hand off the wheel and let it go. But no, I think it's very important to, I hate this phrase, but you got to eat your own dog food, right? And have the ability of trying out the tools and things you want to implement. But, taking it even a step back, I think that, as you're researching, right? So you have your framework. Now you want to plug in the tools that you want to kind of tie into. And so, a lot of that takes a lot of experience of understanding that you have to be very clear on what you want. And if you don't know what you want, you have to educate yourself on what you want, because, there are a lot of great vendors in this space, but there are vendors that, want to make the sale because they feel like their product is the best in class, and everyone believes they're best in class, right? So you kind of have to do your due diligence to figure out, what tool do you use to plug in a particular section of your services that you're going to offer. Now, for example, we were looking for a solution specifically to have a static cloud IP address. Okay. That's all we wanted. We wanted a network where we can have a static cloud IP address, have a VPN connect to it, so we can do all our IP restrictions and manage our networks that way. Because we didn't want to do a static IP at our office, because then now we're opening ports to have the VPN connect to the actual IGR business firewall, etc., to gain that connection and that traveling, right? So, and there are plenty of services out there, right? But again, we were very specific on what our need was: a static cloud IP address that we can have a VPN in. And so there are all these great solutions that have the gateway with the static IP address. They have the ability to segment networks, but then they have all this other extra stuff where it's like threat blocking and threat avenue. And this is the so-called cloud firewall. Here's the dirty secret, everyone. Cloud firewalls are just a cloud VPN connecting to a static cloud IP. Now, yes, they have services and proprietary stuff inside of it to help protect the client, but that's essentially what it is. For anyone that wants to prove me wrong, come at me. Come at the show. I would love that. I love to stir the pot a little bit. But anyway, so I say all that.
Have some vendors calling.
That's okay. I'd like to have them come on. Let's talk a little bit. Let's have some more information, because I don't believe we've had a cloud firewall come on the show yet. So we can definitely have that conversation on why their tool is what it is. But again, everyone had all these great solutions to take over other solutions, which is great, but that's not where I was at that time. I wanted to plug this particular hole, this particular section of our tool. Once we, dive into that particular tool, then we can expand and eliminate services and start doing all that sort of jazz, right? But in reality, that's where it comes down to, is knowing really specific what you want and then acquiring all those services as well. Now, the next piece to that that I'll go into, and I'll throw it back to you, Rick, is, do your tools talk to each other? And what is your single source of truth? So for us, our PSA/RMM is the single source of truth. Now, there's some variance to that, because, there is identity, right? The identity management piece of it all, which really, that should be the hub of how everybody logs in, whether that's an identity access provider like Microsoft, Google, Jump Cloud, etc. And then everything kind of falls into that. But in my realm of my services, there should be a hub that everything kind of integrates into and kind of goes from there. So the specifics on that is, for us, it's our PSA and RMM, which is Syncro. So the question is, what integrations are happening? Are those integrations working with each other very well? Are they secure? Things of that nature, right? I'll tell you a story where, we were using the security awareness training from Curricula. Loved the platform, but it felt like it was very siloed. And so we were like, wow, man, I think we should probably go into something that's integrated to one of our other tools, make sure that it kind of works well. And then they got announced that Huntress acquired them. So we're a Huntress provider. It's going to get rolled in. Well, and it stayed. So, and I love the content. I love Nick over there and his team over there, the founders of Curricula. But like, that's how we perceive is, how do we eliminate dashboards? How do we become more efficient? Specifically, how do we do the KISS principle, which, for those that don't know what the KISS principle is keep it simple, silly. And there's other versions of that, but that's what we use internally, because we don't want to insult anybody. And really figuring out how to maintain the easeability, mitigate risk, and really figuring out how to provide a service that we can communicate to our clients, from our level 1 office admin to all the way up to me and everyone in between to understand what we offer. So those are some of the items of like next steps outside of kind of determining what you're trying to do, is making sure that everyone understands what you're doing and everything kind of goes together. So everybody understands that everything kind of goes together in some way, shape, or form that we've kind of plugged into of this hub of the wheel on how everything works.
Right. Now, I one of the challenges, I'll just say this, that I had, and I'm going to feed off of what you just said, is when you define, as you say, you were trying to define one portion, everything came and it offered, these other things as well, right? Which then you get, I have a product for that already. I have one that does this, so it does it better than that one, or my experience with it has been better, so I don't want to switch that. So this is where we run into that overlapping portion of it, right? Where you end up with a tool you purchased for a specific need, but it does some other things, but you have another tool that does that you think does it better. So now you're stuck with, what should I, what decision do I make? Do I stay with the one that does a little bit of it, or do I go to go to the
consolidate?
Use both, basically. Yeah, consolidate or use both.
So here's my explanation for you on that. Yes, if there's not ticket sprawl, this is a window over here. Imagine this thing opened up all the way and you just grabbing all your cash and just throwing it out the window every single time you can, right? So that's a real concern, right? And that's a real concept. And I'm going to give you a perfect example of this. We utilize the remote access tool from our RMM, and we were using ConnectWise Control for remote support. Okay. This is not my experience. Well, this is kind of my experience, but this is what my guys are telling me compared to the remote access. And it's just capabilities. This is just all where it goes down to.
Right.
I said, well, I don't feel like paying $100 a month for a couple licenses from ConnectWise Control when I have remote support capable of inside of my RMM. Hey guys, level 1, level 2, we're cutting it off. I got all the explicitives that said that's not going to happen. And I, as the business owner, said, this is what's happening. Well, guess what happened? I now notice that through their haste and through the functionality of how it exists inside of our RMM, they were not as efficient as they could be when they had the ConnectWise Control. Now, the problem with all that is now I'm sacrificing time efficiencies, which time equals, we all hear it first, it's time. Money. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's money. So, so money is the biggest piece on that. So when we realized this, and it was taking longer to do a remote session because we removed the tool, we ended up costing more than the $100 we were paying per month. So we ended up putting it back. Now that's one example of what do you do, right? But it demonstrates a very important lesson where, again, goes into, you have a specific thing that you need to put in place, but you also have something else that does it as well. The reason why I say you focus on what you want to put in, and yes, there will be some overlap. Thank you. But you don't have the time, in my opinion, or you will have to invest time to investigate which one do you really want to do. The tool that you've already vetted and you're already utilizing and everything is good and there's nothing broken per se, or do you want to invest the time to A, test, B, pilot, C, deploy, and then monitor? That's all time that you're spending to try and utilize this tool when you could have just continued to keep using the tool that it already works, and you create the time when you're ready to implement it versus at sale.
Right.
And then I go back to the third example, which not really related, but there are plenty of great tools that are out there. that I would love to implement, but I don't have the time to put it into place. And I don't give a damn what all these salespeople will say. I was in many conversations where they're like, I'm like, look, I know what the tool does. It takes time to implement. I don't have the time. Oh, well, we do all that. But yeah, someone's talking to your team to do it. They're still taking out time to do it. I don't have time to do that. Nor do I have time to pay you for 4 months of me not utilizing the product when I could have just used that somewhere else. And when I was ready, then go ahead and take advantage and not lose the $1,000 that I just paid to you guys out of charity. Sorry, I'd rather put that to other charitable sources than, you know, going to a vendor's. Like, I'm all about supporting vendors. Let me be very clear on that. But when I can, I don't want to just throw,
and when it makes sense,
when it makes sense, right? Like, I want to have the time to implement. I want to have the time to put it in place. I get it. It's a great tool. Just don't have the time to do it. So that's just where it goes into of making sure you take a look at what you're doing as you're researching it. But even if you're trying to consolidate, and it sounds like a great idea, the amount of time it's going to take to invest. I can tell you last year, I wasted a whole bunch of time for 12 months implementing a consolidated tool that I mentioned that crossed all of the cybersecurity products that I needed, but it took way more time to remove my old stack, implement, test, monitor, figure out what was the BS alerts versus the real one, and then the time to pull it out when we realized it wasn't a good fit. It's almost, again, 12 months of wasted effort that I could have just stood with our current stack we had prior to that just to move forward.
Right. And one of the things that I've known, and I've been guilty of this. And I've said this on air. I've had 2 tools that I paid for 6 months, 8 months that I had every intention of implementing and didn't get around to until that time. Now, one of them, I'm glad I finally did it. It was the right thing to do. The other one, I learned a valuable lesson. I learned a lesson from both of them, right? Again, it took me 8 months to implement a tool that I paid for a year, right? I mean, I paid for 8 months. That's, $1,000+ out the window.
Yep.
And only because we didn't use it. Now, 2 lessons come in that. One, I don't have to be the one all the time to implement everything. Excuse me. Right. Having a team, first and foremost, and then there has to be a real need for it, not because it's shiny or not because I think it looks good or I think we need it, right? We have to need it. And that has been the process I've implemented. And one of the things I've done now is empower Latrice to say no, right?
Yeah.
Now, she doesn't have the technical acumen that I have or understanding, right? Michael and David, I can go to and say, hey, or they'll come and say, hey, we need to, I have a need, right? And I tell them all the time, if you don't feel like we have something that can fit, let me know. And then we can figure out how to do it, right? If you need something and it's making you think it'll make your job easier, let me know. For her, I say, look at the finances part of this, right? And then let's ask the practical questions. Are we investing in this because it really will help grow Renactus? Are we investing in this because it will, in some way move us forward, however it is, with customers, with how we do our own business, whatever, secure wise, whatever. And then do we have something that's doing it already, first and foremost? And is this going to make that process that much better? And it has been, I will say, one of my biggest downfalls is is doing that, is saying I need something. I have a board to my left with a list of things to do. And some of those tools were still on there. Implement X, implement Y. And that's been sitting there, seriously, that's been sitting there for months. And I see it every day. And, it gets frustrating. So it goes back to what you're saying, the tool, and the fact of the matter is, no matter what the price deal they have going, and again, this is not a slam at the vendors, but no matter what special they got going on, what price they can get it at now that the price is going to change, excuse me, next week, it doesn't matter. If you do not have the capacity to add it in a reasonable time frame, and that reasonable time frame has to be something you determine. If it's 1 month, 2 months, 10 days, 6 months, it seemed like where I was at before with my capacity to do it, then you should wait on it. And it'll be, again, if you think about it, if the product goes up $10 or 50 cents a user or device, whatever the price may be, you still have saved money because rather than paying for it for 6 months and never using it. Right. So that's got to be the decision you make. And you get on me all the time about that. And I finally learned my lesson about it. And I've taken myself out of the decision making process of that. And that's probably the best way to do it.
And the only reason why I quote unquote get on you about it is because Jeff because I did the same problem, right? Like I made the same mistake. I knew and Jeff at the time for me was really the one that really knocked me over the head to say, hey, why do you need to do that? For your ego? So you can look like it looks all nice and whatever? What is your customers really asking for? And, there's a difference between a new efficient way of how you're doing things, right? And then there are ways of how do we improve that experience, right? Now, and the question becomes, all right, above those two, is the right areas that you're trying to improve the experience, the right areas that you should be attacking right now? And that's kind of the real big thing. So and I pick on you for the same vendor you told me about, well, it's this nice shiny thing and it does this and it slices bread and it sprinkles on, fresh fruit on a crepe. And I'm like, well, that's cool. But how many times do you have crepes? You usually have toast. Just use the toaster you got right there. If you want some fresh fruit, put a couple of strawberries on top of the toast. Put a little cream cheese on it. Still looks good. Still works for what you need it to do. It still functions what it is. I think we get lost in a lot of this thing. I was paying at the time it was $150 a month for a website. Or no, I was paying $300 a month for a website, and I was just like, well, why? Oh, well, because it's got this and that and blah, 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 and whatever. And it's like, well, at the time I was only residential, so I wasn't using the business services blogs that they were offering. The SEO piece was more computer repair than MSP and managed services. I wasn't utilizing a lot of that. There was a lot of the review sites that we were trying to put in through and go from there. And FYI, in case Matt's listening, it was not you for Tech Marketing Engine. It was another vendor because, the money spent over there was well spent. If this was another vendor that was prior to Tech Marketing Engine, because it's funny enough, I actually, from them and that conversation with Jeff, I ended up flipping over to Tech Marketing Engine. So just because of the value that it provided, it was a much better value for what we needed. And when their services grew, I was able to grow with them. So that's kind of how all that kind of worked well, especially now with their new creative services that they have available. For those that haven't heard, they have that service available now. So, but anyway, I'm going a little bit of a ramble. My point is that a lot of us are trying to make ourselves into something possibly that we are not. And I'm not saying you, I'm saying a lot of everyone that is smaller trying to show themselves, right? But there are clients that are going to look for what they need for quality. If it doesn't work out, they're not your client at that time. There are vendors that are really trying to dive in specifically. And I talked about this on stage yesterday when I was at the MSP Rescue. The whole point of our conversation here on doing MSP Unplugged, Tech Talk Tuesday, Resource Thursday, is to help the emerging IT solution provider get connected to a vendor that otherwise, A, doesn't realize the opportunities they have to help support someone to scale, but B, listening to my own story of all I wanted was someone to give a damn. And when I got the people that did give a damn, I grew with them. And now that we've scaled, they're obtaining the actual benefit from us scaling as well. I was just talking to my rep over at Huntress the other day, and he was like, hot damn. He's like, you'd be surprised on how some people would just do a couple agents here and there. And then when you kind of grow with them, it's amazing on how you see people just scale, because we've made it such an approachable effort for us to kind of get into. And we understand there is that growth, there is that coaching, there is that nurturing, but then there are those that want to stay the way they are, and we want to help them too, right? And that's the mentality of what you got to kind of look for when you are researching your tools, when you are researching your vendors, because it should not be transactional. You should not be a cheap son of a gun. You cannot be, it's way over than what I'm worth to try and pay. Because I used to be there too. I used to never think that I would ever pay for a cloud software as a solution. There was a time where I said, there is no way I'm paying someone to just log into a website and do what I need to do. If I don't have a physical software on there, I'm finding a free version of it. Never will that happen. It is disgusting on how much I'm paying right now a month for a freaking software as a service because everything is going to that right. But that's the nature of the business, right? And it was a mentality thing that we had to kind of change ourselves. And again, different strokes for different folks, trying to really figure out how to design your services that are for you to help your clients. And you are on mute, my friend.
One of those decisions. I didn't want to keep coughing on the air. I got a little bit of the Jersey cold now, but
no worries.
What, you know, part of those decisions you're talking about too, about paying for a SaaS or paying, you know, this price for something, is we factor in two things. That's way too expensive. And then I got to sell that now to my clients, right? So, hey, if I'm going to pay, and I'm just throwing out a number here, and so don't anybody tell me about what the margin should be. But if I got to sell something, buy something from a vendor for $3, now I got to go sell it back to a client for $6 or whatever, you know, whatever your margin you're looking at to do. We worry. I think at that point, we're worrying about the wrong things, right? We start, and this I got from you, a conversation you, me, John, and Jeff had one time about that. If that is the issue, you're worrying about the wrong things. If you're honestly in your head know that you're giving the client the best value and the best opportunity, it doesn't matter what the price is, right? You're giving them the best product at the best price you can get. And sometimes, and you know, some products are not cheap and they just are going to cost you,
right,
you know, but you know, again, it's like everything else. Your clients don't think you're cheap. Exactly. And you know, it's what it's worth. It's what is it worth? What are you worth to your clients and the services you offer to them? Now, we've gone through talking about basically the framework we use to pick it, the you know, and then how we make a decision. Now, when you look at the framework, you look at picking your vendors. What are those key components you're looking at? You know, and when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about what categories are you hitting? You know, EDR, third patch. You know, just give me your list that you find most essential.
So I got it pulled up here, which is funny you say essentials, because what we've done is we have made our plans on the implementation groups of CIS, which they call IG1, which is foundation, IG2, and then IG3. For us, we've called IG1 our essentials plan. IG2 is essentials plus. IG3, which is normally compliance, mandates, etc., framework, you know, a specific pressure is the term I learned. Not compliance, not mandatory, not, you know, standards, you know, such as like HIPAA, GDPR, FINRA, etc. These are all compliances, but our clients don't give a damn about that word compliance. But what they hear is this is pressure that these organizations are doing to these particular our end users or end clients. So that's considered IG3, which is what we call custom. And so it's basically essentials plus whatever the custom, and that's an added piece, which is including the IG3. Now, what do we include? And I'm just going to go over our IG1 because they both kind of are similar in style. But basically, we include an IGR, which is basically your firewall, and that's going to charge on a monthly basis. We have our RMM. We have our third-party patching. We have our cloud VPN service that serves as our quote-unquote cloud firewall. As I kind of, you know, poked fun at earlier on what they are. We do have a security DNS that is deployed two different ways. Either it's done by the identity provider or it is done by a service, such as, there are those like WebTitan, DNS Filter, Zorus. Those are a few in that space. We actually provide a cloud backup of, depending on what their cloud version is, whether that's Microsoft 365 or that's Google Workspace. We also provide the encryption for the actual system, which is maintained by the RMM policy. We have our Microsoft 365 licensing. We have our spam filtering.
Data encryption, you mean, right?
Data encryption, yes.
Yeah.
We have our Microsoft licensing. We have our spam filtering. We have our email encryption. We have our password manager. We have our security awareness training. I think we mentioned a little bit earlier about our identity provider or an identity solution to help with that. We have our AV, which obviously it's got to be managed, because if we just have an AV on the system and it's not managed, that's going to be a bit of a pain in the butt. We have a managed EDR, which is obviously our, what is it called now? Endpoint detection and response. Mm-hmm. But, there's MDR, EDR, XDR. Now I heard there's another acronym. I mean, I tell you what, man, I was talking to Jerry yesterday about these acronyms, and we both were saying, man, we sure do miss that phrase Jeff would say, man, just stick a fork in our eye, because they come up with new ones every day.
Every day.
We have a third-party SMTP service. We have a monitoring of all the email records for SPF, DMARC, DK, and DKIM. We are implementing a SaaS monitoring solution, so that we can actually see what's going on SaaS-wise, security as a service, meaning, your HubSpots, your websites, your ClickUps, things of that nature that they're probably accessing that either A, they shouldn't, or B, that we at least can monitor. And then we throw a little bit of labor in there somewhere in piece. So that's basically, quote unquote, the 25 things that we put into the service. And then IG2 are just upgrades to those services that we have, along with some additional things like penetration testing, full logging, and ensuring that we have single sign-on, IP restriction. But those are more policy type places versus an actual stack. But for ours, it's about 25 things that we kind of implement we offer as our essentials service, and those are the categories that I just kind of rattled off on my list.
All right. We're pretty much the same. We approach it a different way, but we're pretty much the same, because excuse me, we just do it. We, like I said, we base everything on those 4 categories that we focus on, which is users, workstations, which are desktops and laptops, servers, and then the platform itself, which would be basically everything in the server room and all the other things we do that are not necessarily visible. So we look at the same things, and then we do add things, and then, like, for us, we add in there things like documentation. I know you guys do it, but we count that. One of the things that like a SaaS monitor is great for something else that we got to think about as we look at insurance companies asking, hey, do you 2FA this or 2FA that? A SaaS monitor can help you determine if those SaaS products that the customer uses, that they go to, are those 2FA'd, right? If you have a line of business software that's online that a customer uses, that should have a 2FA on it, right? Because there's vulnerability there.
Exactly.
And, so things like that, this is where you learn that one product helps you with more than one thing. So those, so we pretty much try to cover all of that. It's hard to explain it all to the customer, but the other part, the first thing you said when we started this conversation that I think is sound advice for every MSP is you have to eat your own dog food, right? Everything that you require for a client should be required on your network, should be required for you, for every employee you have, and anyone else that touches your systems that works internally, right? Because first and foremost, that has to be the test. That has to be the standard bearer. So, and that doesn't matter. We use, as you said, you guys use the 1, 2, and 3 of, I forget how the essentials, say it again, the essentials.
Oh yeah. Essentials Plus, and then custom for IG1, okay, IG2, and IG3 of CIS.
Right. Now we use some different names. We just call it the BSA, and it's basically basic, standard, and advanced. So we have that basic level that minimum that everyone needs. The standard is, hey, this is everything in basic that you would need, plus some some other tools. Basically, the basic is the bare bones. We can't do business with you if you won't implement these things. Standard is where you should be, and advances. Hey, every company has some unique needs that you may have that to add those a la carte products in to help them for whatever. So that becomes what we consider our advanced package. But again, it's pretty much, the same format. We just list them out, try to hit each one of those categories and make that work for each, for the clients. Again, there are going to be unique situations where you're going to have to get some one-offs for certain things. But having that standard and knowing what it is, which again gets brought up from the beginning, defining what your services are, helps you determine what products fit into those categories. And I guess the next part of this is trying to figure out a way, and I think we should probably can wind up our conversation on this, but trying to figure out a way to decrease the sprawl that we get. And, that again goes back to that conversation of having one or two products that do the same thing. Sometimes it can't be helped. I'm willing to say that, and you're just going to have to, bite the bullet on that. But other times it can. And I'm going to leave two questions for you. But the first one is this. When you sit down, I know you guys said you're doing in August, right? Mm-hmm. And you have your conversation about where you're going, what's happening, what's going on. Are you, because I know I used to get on you about this a lot, is you say to me, hey, guess what? We're moving to this or we're moving to that. Have you sat, and this is, again, something I've learned, you have to give stuff a try unless it really totally fails you. So have you set a time frame and say, we're going to stay with this for X days, months, years, weeks, whatever? Yeah.
No, so we don't set a time, but we know, like, normally it's a month. We usually give 30 days on a particular solution, but that's not a hard firm. We need to suffer for 30 days. If we know it sucks, and that's it, right? So, there's a bunch of products where, like, they'll need to use a particular device to be able to control whatever needs to happen on a software basis, and that ends up being crap. Or if there is a, it was sold to us that, hey, you can do X, but, actually you could do X and Y. But you need to buy something additional for Y. Then it's like, all right, well, that's bull, because we told you what we needed. You said it can do it. This is not the full complete project. We're not going to do business with you. Right. So there are things like that occur. So we do try to stick it out. And then there are just some times where it's just like, wow, this is just terrible. Why are we still punching ourselves in the face for this? Well, let's continue to keep going through the pace. Let's modify. Let's figure it out. I mean, down to where we were looking for a spam filter. I mean, we were literally punching ourselves in the face for 3 months because we were literally trying to fix the spam filter we had. And we just realized it is not working. No matter, once we reached out to support, once we implemented what they told us to do, once we tried to, we just realized the spam filter is not what's up. So we switched, but then we really were punching ourselves in the face because now it was catching everything. And so we were dealing with those pain points and trying to figure out and go through and still punching ourselves in the face. But now we've gotten to a point where, like, all right, we rather have this than that, because, in this case, the spam filtering, we rather catch more and it'd be a pain than someone getting something and then we're screwed up. Believe it or not, we are under a spear phishing attack right now, and for those that don't know, phishing attack is obviously someone just does a drive-by with a bot and kind of go from there. For us at Prodigy Tech, someone specifically is researching us and is specifically spear phishing us right now, where a lot of my team members are getting emails for phishing, and they're making them very crafty, very convincing, and it's bypassing our phishing because we are under a spear phishing attack right now. And so you got to try and, adjust and make sure what's what, and can't judge certain services for certain things. It's a big, weird situation that, you got to kind of figure yourself out on the services you're implementing. Do you go through with it and given enough ample time. But you know, when you're doing this for quite some time, you kind of know when's your limitation on doing some things to be able to implement. But I wanted to take this a little bit layer back in how you said, how do we stop the tool sprawl? And I think what's important is not only how do you stop yourself from the tool sprawl, but how do you make sure that you stay consistent and you're not being negligent to your clients to offer them a new solution that is going to be much more efficient, much more better than what you're currently offering. And so this was a very big eye opener when I had my team, had my office coordinator, and then my now director of admin operations go to TechCon so that they can experience an IT industry event, right? And so, you know, they went down in the vendor booths and they're signing up for trials. And I'm like, why the heck are you signing up for trials? You're not the ones that are technical savvy for us to figure this out. I know who's who and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, through this investigation of their own with fresh eyes, they basically were like, hey, I think this vendor would be really cool. Which in this case, it was our phone system. We ended up flipping over from 8x8 to BVoIP. And, you know, and I've known George for years. And I just was like, yeah, you know, we've talked to him way back when I was a solo guy. I hadn't talked to him in years. Turned out they cut my phone bill in half compared to what their pricing is versus what I was paying at 8x8. So, you know, it's one of those where, you know, it has a better integration, allows for better transparency. So, you know, it's just one of those where, you know, maybe having your employees going to particular events and helping you with their, you know, one, getting the industry knowledge, right? That helps them look at things a little bit differently. But B, it also helps you to kind of keep your eye on the prize and understand like, all right, well, maybe there is something out there to take a look at. But you got to kind of, you know, put your foot down when it comes to what needs to be put in and what doesn't need to be put in as well, with the shiny new object syndrome as well.
Yeah, and it's just and it's making those decisions. Like it's interesting. You talked about your spam filter issue, and I know we use the same product.
Yeah,
and I've always told you I didn't have that problem, right? That you were having, but I realized why. When I first implemented this, I actually used two solutions for the same and not for the same problem, but for two different problems, but they did overlap. So what was missing in one, the other was catching, and vice versa. Right. So I've worked it out that is the solution for me is both of those. Right. So it is just interesting how that works.
Well, I think you know, and I go back and forth on this specifically because, you know, me and John will discuss this where there was one. So what you're referring to is, you know, the constant mismarketing of solutions to say that they do both. And so what we're referring to is anti-spam and anti-phishing. They are both not the same thing. Exactly. But there are spam filter companies that will advertise that they do anti-spam and anti-phishing. And oftentimes they're full of it because they're doing spam and they can do phishing, but they don't do both well. And specifically on the phishing side, they don't do well. And so I don't want to put this all on our decisions that we made, but we tried to figure before we were using two solutions similar to you. We were using a spam filter, and I can't remember who the heck was the spam filter was at the time. And then we were I can't remember who we were using. And then we were using Cyberfish, which is now known as Cofense Protect. And so with that combination, it was working well, but you know, Cofense at the time was early in their years. They were having some retry mechanisms that weren't deploying that have since been resolved, is what I understand from their solution. But that anti-phishing solution caught a whole ton of stuff that didn't get caught on the spam filtering side. And so we have been trying to find one solution that does both. And I would have to say that, you know, can I confirm that the solution we have now is doing both anti-spam and anti-phishing? Yes. Will it do it as well as a company that is dedicated to anti-phishing? That is still yet to be seen.
Right. So yeah, and that's when that, you know, for me, I said it ain't broke, so I ain't gonna try to fix it, and I'll leave it there. Which is one of those things we got to do too. So to answer the question I asked earlier as well, that you answered about giving it some time, one of the things, and again, we are a vendor pro show, so I don't want this to come out the wrong way. But as an MSP, you get inundated with calls from vendors all day. Some you know, some you've never heard of before. They all want 10 minutes of your time, 15 minutes, 30 minutes to have someone introduce their product to you. And if you commit to all of those, you could really, you're finding 10, 15 hours a week that you're dedicating to vendors for presentations. So one of the things we've been starting to do now is, again, I ask my guys, where are we missing? What are we lacking? What do you wish is better? What was better for us, right? How do we improve? And if they tell me it's a product, then okay. If someone calls that may be able to hit that solution, let's talk to them, right? If it's a situation where it's something I'm using and I'm very happy with it, I'm not going to be rude to a vendor, but at this time right now, we're not looking. Give us a call back at the end. And this is why I'm bringing this up. We use, and I've committed myself to this, I use October, November, and December to test anything new. If I'm going to put it in a test system somewhere, put it in our own system, something, that's the time we use it. Unless something we are using now terribly goes wrong. Or, again, I've hung in with vendors because I like them. Again, we're just like our clients. We do business with people we know, like, and trust. So I've hang in there with vendors who were not as great for me, but they were, I felt like they were trying to address the issue. You give them time. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, it's a business decision. We have to move on. But, and then, sometimes they come around and get it right. And I appreciate it. Or at least I appreciate that they acknowledge it's an issue rather than trying to tell me it's the way I'm using it, as opposed to the way you told me it was supposed to be, that it was supposed to be done. But anyway, right. I say all that to say, we're trying the on paper policy is we're going to go, once we make a decision and we go with a new stack for the year, we're going to stay with it for the year unless something terribly goes wrong. Right. And then now again, we will make lists and say, hey, this has been a pain. This has been, and you have to decide too, you have to define what is a real problem, right? Is it a problem because you don't understand something, you're not configuring it right? Or is it a problem because it doesn't do what they told you it was going to do, no matter how many choices you made to, how many chances you've given them to fix the problem? Because some things just don't work right. And, it's just time to move on, or it just doesn't work to your expectation or to your needs. So that's the decision, we all have to make, is how long do we hang in and how do we define what works and what doesn't work, right? And then, we try to do that. So then in October, November, December, when we're trying to push out that new stack to clients to go to our 2024 version or 2023 version, whatever it is of what we're offering, we now know where we're going. So that is, because the other problem is, and I'll leave it with this, if you constantly find small things and small reasons to change, you will never settle on anything. And it is not efficient for you, your business, or your employees, because they have to constantly keep learning new things now. And that takes away efficiency for them. And it takes away, efficiency given to your clients. So, it's just one of those things we got to keep in mind.
I agree.
So I am going to, Paco and I talked about this before the show, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I am going to steal or borrow or implement, however you want to say it.
Don't come for us to hear.
So don't sue me, Tyra. But I'm going to give credit. I listened to a podcast, and he was a guest on here, Tahir Ahmed. He does the MSP marketing podcast. Wow, why can't he? Oh my God, why?
No Fluff Marketing.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Tyra. No Fluff Marketing. And, Tara and I met last year, ran into him again at the Acronis Summit. I listened to the No Fluff Marketing podcast. I actually am a member of his MSP camp, which is he does a lot of marketing information, basically, a lot of marketing ideas. So I want to give him credit for this. So on his podcast, they do a challenge of the week. Now, I'm not going to do it the way they do it with the deep voice and they take it from the Mortal Kombat theme. I'm not going to do all of that. But I think it is a great idea. And so in MSP Unplugged, we're going to start doing that during our Tech Talk Tuesday talk. Now, I said all that long speech to say this. The second part of this challenge comes from another group I'm a member of, and that's the Tech Tribe. Now, there's been a thread floating around. It was started last year, but essentially, and I don't need to go into the whole thing, but essentially it's like if you take all your tools that now we've had this long discussion about tools, but we're going to talk about tools that you install on a client system to make them run. If you looked at those tools, the challenge of the week is, could you get that down to 5 or less? And if those are 5 or less, what would they be? And this is just a question to ask yourself. So this will be our challenge of the week, is to write down the tools you're using or list the tools you're using that physically go on a client's machine. Count how many those are. And then ask yourself, are all of those necessary? And if I could I get that down to 5 or not? And I would appreciate it in the comments. Anyone who's listening, just give us some feedback on it. Email us or put it in the comments on YouTube. Just let us know if that is possible. And if you could do it, what would they be? Mm-hmm. So everyone, I will leave you with that. Paco, before we close out, my friend, any last words?
Do better. No, I'm kidding. I think we just got to get to good, try and figure out what you can. Don't let the shiny old objects, blind you from your success. And you just got to keep it moving. Follow what we just said in this show. And if it's not your speed or it's not your style, you could take what you want, or you can leave what you don't care for either.
Exactly. Everyone, I do want to thank you for tuning in. And we ask you to tune in every Tuesday and Thursday. You can watch the video podcast on mspunplugged.com or youtube.com/mspunplugged. Also on our Facebook page, facebook.com/mspunplugged. We do need you to help us out. Like, subscribe, hit the notification button to be notified whenever a new episode is available. You can take us on the go with your favorite podcatcher app. We're on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. On behalf of Paco and I and the rest of the community, I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on MSP Unplugged.